Derek's grueling day as a courier took a sharp turn when a broken elevator forced him to climb 18 flights of stairs, only to face humiliation and quiet racism from a powerful office manager. What began as frustration turned into a bold complaint, sparking a chain of events that toppled a corporate giant and inspired countless others. What he did next would shock even the most skeptical. But let's start at the beginning. Derek, a 28-year-old black courier, started his morning like every other, loading packages into his van and carefully mapping out his route. By the time the sun was high, he was drenched in sweat from the city's sweltering heat, weaving through traffic, dodging double-parked cars, and unloading heavy boxes. Most of the day passed uneventfully, until he pulled up to one of his last stops, a towering downtown office building with reflective glass walls and a sleek lobby. His destination was Suite 1802, on the 18th floor. As he approached the elevator, a handwritten sign stopped him in his tracks. "Elevator out of service. Sorry for the inconvenience." Derek let out a long, exasperated sigh, staring at the package in his hands. It was large and awkwardly shaped, and he knew it would only grow heavier with every flight of stairs. He glanced at the lobby receptionist for help, but she avoided his gaze, too preoccupied with her phone to care. Resigning himself, Derek headed for the stairwell. The climb began with determination, each step echoing in the dimly lit, stale-smelling stairwell. By the 6th floor, his legs burned and sweat trickled down his neck. By the 10th, his breathing became labored, and his muscles ached from gripping the box. The package dug into his forearms, leaving red marks on his skin. Stopping for a moment, Derek leaned against the wall, feeling the heat radiate off his body. "Just 8 more flights," he muttered to himself. When he finally reached the 18th floor, he was drenched, his uniform soaked through. His legs felt like lead as he pushed open the door and dragged himself into the brightly lit hallway. The air conditioning was a welcome relief, but it did little to temper the frustration bubbling inside him. Derek adjusted the box on his shoulder and made his way to Suite 1802, where sleek glass doors opened to reveal a spacious office with panoramic views of the city. Standing by the front desk was Mr. Randall, the office manager. He was a tall, broad-shouldered white man in his 50s, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit and polished leather shoes. His icy blue eyes glanced at Derek, narrowing with impatience. "You're late," Randall snapped, not even bothering to greet him. Derek placed the box on the counter with a thud, trying to catch his breath. "The elevator's out, sir," he replied, forcing himself to stay calm despite his exhaustion. Randall crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "And? That's not my problem, is it?" He gave Derek a dismissive once-over. "Next time, figure it out faster. Time is money." Derek stared at him, his chest heaving, the comment hitting him like a slap. He felt the sting of sweat in his eyes and the weight of his aching body, but even more unbearable was the sting of Randall's condescension. Without another word, the office manager turned and walked away, leaving Derek standing there, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. Derek swallowed the surge of frustration burning in his chest, placed the package on the counter, and tapped through his delivery app to mark the job as complete. He turned, eager to leave the stifling atmosphere of the office, when a sound caught his attention. 2 employees leaning against the reception desk were laughing quietly. One of them, a younger man with a smirk plastered across his face, muttered just loud enough for Derek to hear. "Guess that's all they're good for, lugging heavy stuff." The words hit like a punch, sharp and stinging. Derek froze for a second, his jaw tightening as his heart pounded with a mix of anger and humiliation. He'd been on the receiving end of casual disrespect before, but hearing it so openly in this upscale setting, after the grueling climb, felt unbearable. Still, he said nothing. Years of experience had taught him to keep his composure, even when every fiber of his being screamed to respond. As he stepped into the stairwell to begin the long descent, Derek's body ached with exhaustion, but his mind was alive with indignation. The climb, the snide comments, the cold dismissal from Randall, it all churned inside him like a storm. He had put up with so much over the years. The dismissive tones, the thinly veiled disdain, the assumption that his role was beneath them. But today, something shifted. The blatant disrespect felt impossible to ignore. Later that evening, when the sun had dipped below the city skyline and Derek's shift was finally over, he sat in his small apartment, staring at his phone. He debated whether to let it go, as he usually did, or to say something. For once, he chose the latter. Typing carefully, he filed a formal complaint with the property management company, describing the ordeal in detail. He included the elevator outage, Randall's condescending remarks, and the dangerous conditions of carrying a heavy load up 18 flights of stairs. It wasn't just about him, he thought. It was about the countless other couriers who had probably faced the same treatment. To his surprise, the response came quickly. Within hours, an email landed in his inbox. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take issues like this very seriously," it read. Derek sat back in his chair, feeling a flicker of satisfaction. It was only a small step, but for the first time, he felt as though his voice might actually matter. Over the next few weeks, Derek barely thought about the complaint. He'd filed it expecting the usual: silence, indifference, or at best a form email acknowledging his grievance before being promptly ignored. Life moved on, and so did he. Hauling packages through the city, braving traffic and weather, always grinding to meet his deadlines. The memory of Randall's dismissiveness and the employees' sneers still stung, but Derek had long learned to push those feelings aside. Then, one quiet afternoon, as Derek was finishing a lunch break in his van, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Curious, he answered. "Mr. Davis?" A professional yet apologetic voice came through. "This is Clara Reynolds calling from the building's ownership group. We wanted to follow up on the complaint you filed last month." Derek's heart skipped slightly. He sat straighter in his seat. "Yes, that's me. First, let me thank you for bringing these issues to our attention. After reviewing your concerns, we launched a thorough investigation into the tenant in Suite 1802. Our findings revealed several significant breaches of their lease agreement." Derek furrowed his brow. "Breaches? What kind of breaches?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then she continued. "Mr. Randall and his company have a troubling history of mistreating service workers, including multiple documented complaints of discriminatory behavior. There were also numerous reports of creating unsafe working conditions, such as failing to address building maintenance issues like the elevator outage you encountered." Derek was silent for a moment, processing the scope of what she was saying. "The elevator issue," she added, "was the final straw, but it's clear this was part of a pattern. Because of this, we've decided to terminate their lease. They have 30 days to vacate the premises." Derek leaned back, stunned. "You're evicting them?" "Yes, Mr. Davis. We believe it's the appropriate action based on the severity of the violations. Thank you again for speaking up." The call ended, and Derek sat motionless, phone still in his hand. He hadn't expected his complaint to spark real action, let alone lead to the removal of a tenant from such a prestigious building. For years it felt like his voice didn't matter, like speaking up wouldn't change anything. But this time, it had. Justice, however small, was finally on his side. For the first time in a long while, Derek allowed himself a moment of pride. A month later, Derek returned to the same building for another delivery. As he stepped into the lobby, he noticed something different. Suite 1802, once bustling with activity and condescension, now sat empty. The lights were off, and the sleek glass doors bore a small, vacant sign. Derek couldn't help but pause for a moment, the sight striking him in a way he hadn't expected. As he loaded the package onto a cart, a maintenance worker passed by, mopping the marble floor. The man, an older black worker named Harold, stopped and gave Derek a knowing nod, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "You're the guy who made them pack up and leave, right?" Harold said, leaning on his mop. "Good on you. They treated everyone like dirt. Couriers, janitors, you name it. About time someone stood up to them." Derek chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't think it'd go this far," he admitted. "Well, it did," Harold replied, his tone warm. "And it's about time someone like you showed the rest of us that we don't have to just take it." The words stuck with Derek. Word of what had happened spread quickly among the Courier community and other workers who frequented the building. Many of Derek's colleagues, also marginalized workers, began to feel emboldened by his story. Quiet conversations on loading docks and over shared lunches turned into a collective realization. They could speak up against mistreatment. Derek became an unspoken symbol of resilience, proof that even small acts of courage could ripple outward and spark meaningful change. That evening, Derek sat in his van, the city lights twinkling against the windshield as he finished his shift. He thought about the uphill battles he and so many others faced every day. The grueling work, the disrespect, the feeling of invisibility. Yet, for the first time, he didn't feel like just another cog in the machine. His voice had mattered. He'd stood up for himself, and it had made a difference. The city was still unforgiving, and his job remained tough. But as he prepared for another long day of deliveries, Derek felt a sense of purpose. His journey wasn't over, but he was more than ready for whatever came next.